Welcome back to Generative AI Futures. Today, we're not talking theory, no philosophy, no courtroom drama. Today's all about being operational. We are going to build the engine step by step.
It's good to be back. And yeah, operational is the perfect word for it. We usually focus on the software, right? The models, the weights. But today, it's about the metal, the actual silicon that makes February 2026 such a moment for hardware.
Exactly. We're doing a deep dive on the hardware star of the moment. I mean, this is the device sitting on desks everywhere, from Silicon Valley to, university dorms and Bangalore. We're talking about the NVIDIA DGX Spark, and we're going to walk through the complete technical guide on how to turn this little box into a real cluster.
It's a fascinating piece of kit, and our mission for this deep dive is to just, demystify the how. We've got the manual right here, and we're just going to go through it. The goal is to show you how to go from unboxing a piece of hardware to running a 405 billion parameter model in your home office.
Without burning the house down.
Preferably, yeah.
And that's the hook, isn't it? Because when I first saw the Spark, my reaction was just skepticism. It doesn't look like a supercomputer.
It looks like a router. Or maybe a Mac Mini that's been hitting the gym.
Seriously.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the specs, 150 by 150 millimeters. It weighs 1.2 kilograms. That's what, 2.6 pounds? I can hold this in one hand, yet the manual claims this thing rivals servers from like 2023 that filled entire rooms.
It does, and that's not marketing fluff, it's just architectural density. This is the Grace Blackwell architecture. It's the same silicon they're putting in massive hyperscale data centers, just scaled down for your desk.
Okay, so let's unpack that. We have this 2.6 pound box. The manual says 1,000 TOPS trillion operations per second. But we see big numbers all the time, right? What makes this an AI computer and not just a really good gaming PC?
That is the crucial question. And it all comes down to the relationship between the CPU and the GPU. Inside this thing, you've got a 20-core ARM processor, and then you have the Blackwell GPU with 5th-gen tensor cores. In a normal PC, those two parts are like neighbors living on opposite sides of a river. They have to shout at each other across a bridge to get anything done.
Bridge being the PCIe bus.
Exactly. And PCIe is slow. I mean, even the latest generation is slow compared to how fast a GPU thinks. You spend so much energy just copying data from system RAM to the GPU's VRAM. It's just inefficient. The DGX Spark uses a unified memory architecture.
This is the aha moment the manual really emphasizes.
It is. It has 128 gigs of LPDDR5X unified memory. The CPU and the GPU share the exact same physical memory. There's no copying, there's no shouting across the bridge. The bandwidth is 273 gigabytes per second.
Let's pause on that because that has huge implications for coding, right?
Yeah.
Usually I'm writing Python code where I have to explicitly move tensors, tensor.to device. Does this change that whole workflow?
Fundamentally. With the zero-copy architecture, you can have a massive data set just sitting in system memory, and the tensor cores can crunch on it instantly. You lose all that latency. It completely changes how you think about writing your data loader.
That's a game changer. But let's be real. We're talking 1,000 TOPS in a box the size of a sandwich. Heat has to be a problem.
Oh, absolutely. The manual is very clear about the environment. You need to keep it between 5 and 30 degrees Celsius. If you stick this in a hot closet, it's going to throttle. It needs air.
And power. We have to talk about phase one, the initial setup, because there's a critical warning in the manual that I feel like everyone's going to ignore.
The power supply warning. I know the one.
Use only the supplied 240W power adapter.
It's a classic trap. The Spark uses a USB-C port for power. So everyone sees that and thinks, oh, great, my 65-watt laptop charger will work.
Or your phone charger.
Right, and the cable will fit, but the system will just fail. It'll get stuck in a boot loop, or it'll just shut down the second the GPU tries to do anything. The chip itself has a TDP of 140 watts. A normal laptop brick can't feed that beast. You need the full 240.
So, okay, I've got it plugged in with the right brick. I press the power button, and then nothing.
Panic.
The manual says the front boot takes 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That is forever when you've just spent this much money on something.
It is. The system's doing a deep hardware handshake, initializing the OS. You have to be patient. If you get nervous and pull the plug after a minute, you could actually corrupt the file system. You just have to trust it.
Okay, I survive. Wait, I'm in the terminal. First thing I do, what every engineer does, NVIDIA SMI.
Of course. The heartbeat check.
And the output says, memory usage. Not supported.
And your heart stops.
I honestly thought I had a broken unit when I read that. He looks just like a driver failure.
It looks exactly like a broken driver, but it's not. It's a feature, not a bug. Because of that unified memory, the GPU doesn't have its own separate VRAM to report. So the tool, NVIDIA SMI, can't report on GPU memory because that concept, it doesn't exist in the same way. The manual is very clear. This is expected behavior.
That is a huge relief to know. Okay, let's get to the fun part. Phase 2. This is where I feel like a supervillain. The multi-Spark cluster.
Connecting the dots.
We're hooking two of them together. The manual talks about using the rear ports. Forget Wi-Fi, the real action is on the QSFP ports.
The Connect X7 interface, yes.
Walk me through the cabling. The manual says no switch required.
Yeah.
Now, I see that and I get skeptical. Usually for a high-performance cluster, you need a managed switch that costs a fortune and sounds like a 747 taking off. Are they really saying I can just plug these into each other?
For a two-node setup, yes. It's a direct attach connection. You take a QSFP cable and plug node A right into node B.
And the speed on that connection.
A single cable gets you 200 gigabits per second. If you use both ports, you get 400 gigabits per second. That's data center speed on your desk.
That saves thousands on switching gear. But it's not scalable, right? If I buy a third Spark, I'm out of ports.
Exactly. That's the catch. The no-switch setup is just for a two-node pair. The moment you want a third, you're back to buying that expensive switch. So this is really for the power user or a small R&D team.
Got it. Now, how do I know it's actually working? Cables are in, lights are blinking. How do I verify I'm getting 400 GBPs?
You have to test it. The tool for that is iPerf 3. You run one Spark as a server, one as a client, and just blast data between them.
But there's another trap here, isn't there? With the MTU settings.
A huge trap. By default, your network MTU is 1,500 bytes. If you try to push 400 gigabits through tiny 1,500 byte packets, your CPU is going to spend all its time just processing headers. You have to set the MTU to 9,000 for jumbo frames.
So if I run iPerf 3 and I'm seeing 40 gigs instead of 400, MTU is the first thing to check.
It's step 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, so the hardware's connected, the network is screaming. Now for the dark arts, phase 3, the software brain. NCCL configuration.
NCCL NVIDIA Collective Communications Library. This is the software that lets the chips coordinate an AI workload.
And the manual's very specific. You can't just apt-get install this. You have to build it from source, and you have to use a specific build flag, SM121.
This is where people get bogged down. SM121 is the architecture code for Blackwell.
Why is that so important? Why can't I just use a generic build?
Because if you don't use that flag, the compiler doesn't know about all the new instructions in the hardware. It'll treat your 5th-gen tensor cores like simple calculators. You're basically asking a chess grandmaster to play checkers. You lose all the efficiency.
So you compile it.
Yeah.
And then you have to tune the environment variables. The manual lists a few, but NCCL Net GDR level 5 is the one you highlighted.
It sounds like a sci-fi clearance level, doesn't it?
It really does. What is it?
It stands for GPU Direct RDMA. Here's why it matters. Normally, for a network transfer, the GPU sends data to the CPU. The CPU gives it to the network card, sends it over, the other CPU gets it, and gives it to the other GPU.
It's a game of telephone.
A very slow game of telephone, massive latency. With GPU Direct, the GPU on node 1 writes its data directly into the memory of the GPU on node 2. The CPUs don't even touch it. That's how you get linear scaling.
And linear scaling means 2 Sparks are actually twice as fast as 1.
Or very close to it. You always lose a little to overhead, but with this, you're getting near perfect efficiency.
Okay, we've built the Ferrari. Let's drive it. Phase 4, running the AI. What can I do with 2 of these that I just can't do with 1?
It's all about the model size. A single Spark has 128 gigs of memory, which is incredible, but you can't run the really big frontier models like Llama 405B. The model parameters literally won't fit in memory.
So with 2 nodes, we've got 256 GB of unified memory to play with.
Exactly, and you use what's called pipeline parallelism. You slice the neural network in half, so layers 1 through 40 run on node 1, and layers 41 through 80 run on node 2.
So my prompt goes into the first box, gets processed, shoots across that 400 gigabit cable, gets processed by the second box, and then the answer comes back.
Precisely. And that connection is so fast, to you it feels instantaneous.
On the software side, the guide suggests using vLLM for speed, not standard Hugging Face.
Yeah, vLLM is the gold standard for serving right now. It uses something called page attention, which is just way more efficient with memory. We're talking 10 to 20 times faster.
But then there's the Formula 1 option.
Yeah.
Tensor LLM.
Right. TensorRT is what you use when you're done experimenting and you just want raw speed. It requires a compilation step. You convert your model into this optimized engine format. It takes a while, but once it's done, it is the absolute fastest way to run inference, period.
I want to touch on fine-tuning because that's where the real value is. The manual talks about LoRi.
Low rank adaptation, yep.
People get the basic idea. You're not retraining the whole model. But why is the Spark so good for this?
It's that memory bandwidth again. With unified memory, you can actually hot swap LoRa adapters during inference.
Wait, what does that mean?
Okay, so you have your huge 405B base model loaded. You can have a coding adapter and a creative writing adapter just sitting in RAM. And because the bandwidth is so high, you can swap them into the GPU's compute path in milliseconds. So you can serve two completely different specialized tasks without ever reloading the massive base model.
That is the killer feature. That makes it a real product engine.
Exactly.
All right, finally, phase 5, monitoring and troubleshooting. What does a bad day on a Spark cluster look like?
Heat. We mentioned it, but it's the main enemy. You need to watch a tool like NVTop. It's like a task manager for your GPUs. If you see the clock speeds dropping, you've probably got a thermal problem.
What about that low GPU utilization issue? The manual has a whole section on it.
This is the most common frustration. You spend all this money, run your script, and NVTop shows 30% utilization. You feel like you got cheated.
It feels like the hardware is just being lazy.
But it's almost never the GPU's fault. 9 times out of 10, it's your data loader. Your CPU is struggling to feed the beast fast enough. The GPU is just sitting there, waiting for data. The fix is usually to increase the number of workers in your data loader or use a bigger batch size.
And then there's the dreaded out of memory.
The bane of our existence.
Even with 256 gigs, you can hit it. The guide suggests something called gradient checkpointing.
Right, it's a trade-off. Instead of storing all the intermediate calculations during training, you just throw them away. And then you recalculate them on the fly when you need them for the backward pass.
So you're trading compute for memory.
Exactly. It slows down training, maybe 20 or 30%, but it can cut your memory usage in half. It's often the only way.
Or deep speed 0.
Deep speed 0 is just magic. It shards all the model states and parameters across the cluster. It makes sure no single machine has to hold the entire thing at once.
So let's zoom out. We've gone from unboxing a tiny 1.2 kilo box to cabling it up with 400 gigabit interconnects and splitting an AI brain across 2 machines.
It's a journey.
And I want to push back on any idea that this is easy. It's not plug and play.
No, it's engineering, absolutely.
But the setup time is listed as 4 to 8 hours.
Which is insanely fast for what you're building. A few years ago, a cluster with this power took weeks to set up. A dedicated server room, an HVAC contractor.
That's the so what here, isn't it?
It's the democratization of this level of compute. We're talking about the ability to fine-tune a state-of-the-art model on your own private data, completely offline, in a form factor you can fit in a backpack.
It changes who gets to innovate. You don't need a massive cloud contract anymore. You don't need to ask for permission.
A university lab, a startup in a garage, they can now own the infrastructure. And when you own the infrastructure, you own the intelligence.
And that's the thought I want to leave everyone with. If a single engineer can build this in an afternoon, if that barrier to entry has dropped from millions of dollars to just plugging in a few cables, what does the software landscape look like in a year?
When there are millions of these little sparks all over the world.
Exactly. When the hardware is this distributed, the intelligence becomes distributed too. We're going to see things built in basements that we just can't even imagine right now.
It's a brave new world.
Go build something incredible. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
See you next time.